Okay, so the last part of the notes, last video in this lesson, the distance formula. So we're going to use 2 points. We're going to find the distance between those 2 points. So if you look at 2 points in the coordinate plane, this does look like a kind of a complicated formula, but if you think about it, it makes some sense if you've had experience with the Pythagorean theorem. If you think about a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So this is, we could consider these the legs, a and b, and that distance we're trying to find is c. So this is just a rearranging of that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, okay? So when we do the distance formula, we've just got to remember, x's are subtracted, y's are subtracted and squared, and then added together, and then finally at the end we square root that whole expression once we have it simplified. So that whole expression gets boiled down to a number, and then we take the square root of that number, okay? So I'll go through the setup of one of these problems, and hopefully it kind of helps, and then the got it hopefully is also something we can kind of understand. So if we look at this example, we're trying to find the length of RT. We could look at this 3 as x1. We could look at -4 as x2. That makes this y1. That makes this y2, if we're thinking in terms of our formula. So for me to find the length of RT, I gave you a lot of space because I really want you to be able to show the steps so you can follow this example later on. If I'm going to do x2 minus x1, that means -4 minus 3 squared. And then y2 minus y1, that would be 3 minus 2 squared. And then I work on simplifying that. So inside the parentheses is what I'm going to simplify first. -4 minus 3 is -7, and it's important I keep that in parentheses. 3 minus 2 is 1. That is also important to keep in parentheses. Further breaking it down, -7 squared is -7 times -7, which is 49. 1 squared is 1, so 49 plus 1. I get the square root of 50. Now that's not some nice whole number that we can just go on our way and get. So what I want to do is, I'm going to put that in my calculator. And this is just those squiggly lines I drew. Those are just that means an approximation. So this is about, and I'm going to say 7.0. It says in my calculator 707,106. So if I'm rounding to 2 decimal places, 7071, I'd round that down to 7.07. Right? So that distance formula, x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1. Make sure you keep track of the signs, square them, add them together, take the square root at the very, very end, okay? So I'd like you guys to try the got it, and I know it's only one example, but I think you work through this, you check your answers with my solution, and then hopefully then you're ready to move on to the practice, all right? So pause the video, and I'll share my solution in about 5 seconds. All right, so here's how I have it all set up, and I want to walk through this just to make sure we understand why I put the numbers where I put them. So I said through this, -3 was x2, 5 was x1, so I did -3 minus 5 and squared it. And plus 6 was y2, -1 was y1. It's important that those stay consistent. 6 minus -1. So simplifying that, -3 minus 5 is -8. 6 minus -1 is like 6 plus 1, minus a negative. So that's 7. So I got 64 plus 49 inside the square root. That simplified to 113. I took the square root and then I rounded it. So when you're going through these examples, it's important that you show your work, all right? That is very, very important, because if you don't show your work, I can't help you if you get stuck on a particular part of the problem. So it's important with this practice today especially for you to take your time, all right, and not rush through it, because this has a lot of dense concepts here that have a lot of things happening inside of those concepts. So just make sure that you're taking your time and you're asking questions on the practice.